6 now. Does anyone have any announcements for this week? I loved our posts in Buffet. They were super cute. And then Wes, thank you for making that. And then I'm glad we got today about the Canva accounts. Yay! We'll have more posts and social media stuff coming out. I saw that several people shared MFA's posts, and so that looks like it's going well. We're just trying to get our word out there more, and the name of our club and our club out there, so that more people like us and like y'all would care to join. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Wes for our introductions. If he has an announcement, I see his hand raised. Or if anyone else has a quick announcement, and then we'll get started with our program. I'm excited to learn from you, Neal and Dane.
I have an announcement, just by way of background. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I want everyone to feel like they are participating as well. I have the honor of representing our club, and apparently it turns out our district, because I'm the only one going, to the Heart to Heart Mexico City project this month. So I fly on Sunday the 13th to Tyler to Mexico City. I'll meet 29 other Rotarians from around the country. And from there, we will spend 4 days in Mexico City meeting with other Rotarians. I went in 2019, they're always very gracious, very hospitable when we try to reciprocate. But the Mexico club's Rotary is really well advanced. They own a building, a building in Mexico City, and they have a foundation, and they have a lot of money in this foundation, and they use the foundation and their staff to pull in project proposals from all over Mexico, from other Rotary clubs, big and small. Some are big, some are really small, and they manage these projects, these proposals, and then they make them available, I guess, to clubs worldwide, but particularly, at least for our play, to us. And individual clubs or groups of clubs can identify projects on which they would like their club to participate. Some are scaled up very big, some are very small. And so on Sunday, when we arrive, I think we will have a social dinner with the Mexico City clubs. They host us, very nice, fun event, very gracious. On Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we will travel to sites in Mexico City, maybe around Mexico City, and look at projects that we can fund. Maybe a hospital, children's facility, it may be an earthquake damage zone, maybe something of that nature where clubs can participate. And then one day we will spend in the offices of the foundation. It's called FURMU, F-U-R-M-U-R, I believe. It's a Spanish acronym for Foundation of Mexico. And we will hear presentations from clubs who come to make their needs known of what can be done. And what I'm telling you this is because I expect that when I return, I will ask permission to have one of our meetings, like a social meeting, devoted to times where I can show you my pictures and talk with you about what I learned, and offer opportunities that we can participate within our means if we would like to do that as a club. And while I'm gone, I haven't talked to MFA about this, but I'm going to prevail on MFA to help me post pictures and descriptions and things like that on our Facebook, because I don't do the social media stuff. Life is too short, I think. And so with her help, I'd like to keep you apprised of what I'm doing, what I'm saying, photographs, chats, short videos, things of that nature. And so that it's a team club experience. And I'll certainly answer questions while I'm traveling or offer comments, or I hope it's a good experience for everyone. And so that'll be on the 13th. I return on the 17th. So, all right. So let me see if Layla, I don't want to hog the screen. Does anybody else have any comments or announcements? Okay, I think we have a couple. I don't see our membership term, but I know we have a couple of members that are coming in. We have 2 applications that are pending, and Matt Moreland is one. I don't see him tonight, but I think he'll be a great member. Julie Wright is the other one. So, all right. Well, let me talk with you. If can is okay. Are we ready, Layla? Can I go ahead? Right. Okay. So Tyler is a fine community, and like many communities across the country, it is not in a large metropolitan area, and so it has a newspaper, it has TV stations, very good, very fine newspaper, very fine TV stations, and but it's, as everyone knows, print journalism is struggling, and fewer people read print media, more visually oriented and especially social media oriented, and many people are getting their news from dubious sources that are not accurate. That's a real struggle all over the country. And so a group of very brilliant, dedicated people came up with a concept. This is why this is what I thought was the most intriguing aspect, and I wanted Jane and Neal to talk about this more than anything, is how to take an idea, not just an idea, I wonder what if, and move that idea from an idea to a concept, to a plan, to funding, to implementation, to problem solving, to actual execution and success. It's really complicated. And those principles of taking an idea from the idea stage all the way to a finished functioning effort is what we can all learn from, because this is what we do our whole careers. We solve complex problems, we build things, we're creative. And these concepts or principles are transcendent. We can all learn from these. Now, as far as the Tyler Loop itself goes, it's not designed, I'll let them, Jane and Neal, address this. I don't think it's designed to be a newspaper. It's designed to be a storytelling. It tells people stories. It's to enrich the communities by telling the stories of people who are making a difference in the communities whose voices might not otherwise be heard. And they do it in a reasonable, caring, compassionate, balanced way. And that's what I want them to explain to you of the mission of Tyler Loop and how it came. Now, Jane Neal, she's the director of the Tyler Loop. It's a nonprofit journalism startup. And that she says it explores policy, history, demographics in Tyler, but I like to think of it as storytelling, telling people stories. And she's got a wonderful career. The most important of which is she was a French teacher at one of our high schools. And I think she'll probably tell us how she became a storyteller, but that began in probably with her 4 kids, but more likely also with telling senior stories in high school, in the high school where she taught. So a really wonderful opportunity to have her speak to us this night. It's a real tribute. Now, Rabbi Katz, this is good. He's sort of a different kind of cat. I like that, a different kind of cats. All right. He's a fabulous man. Now, I want to tell you, I've got his bio here. You can take it for granted. He's got a lot of degrees and a lot of wonderful stuff. But here's the key. Here's the wonderful thing. Tyler is a very East Texas town, very East Texas. A lot of people who are just born and raised, and they think the Red River is as far as we need to go. But Tyler has become a very ecumenical community. To my knowledge, we really haven't had any of the religious strife during since 2001 in Tyler, the way it might have been in other communities. And this is a tribute to the man we have here tonight. The leaders, the religious leaders in Tyler from all denominations. We have 2 mosques in Tyler. We have 2 synagogues. We have a bunch of churches. And the community leaders, the religious leaders, have worked together to build a dialogue between themselves and relationships, so that when some of these struggles or some of these concerns arise, there's communication and friendship that can solve problems and address issues and have a conversation. And so we look out. I like to say we look out for each other. I've been to the mosque many times. I'd like to go to the synagogues. One's right around my corner. It may be yours, Rabbi Katz, right off Kinsey Drive. And my home is just right around the corner. And so, but it's these bonds, these community bonds that cross religious and even non-religious lines that really speak well, I think, of the city. And that is a tribute to Rabbi Katz. And on a personal note, let's see, he's the rabbi at Congregation Bethel in Tyler. He graduated from Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, found his way here after attending George Mason University in Fairfax. And then, let's see, also Washington, Cincinnati, Ohio, Israel, and has also taught Judaism and Jewish philosophy at TJC, Tyler Junior College, and UT Tyler. He's on every board that counts in Tyler, all kinds of awards. He's married to a wonderful Jennifer Katz, and they have 3 kids. I assume they are all very nice, very successful, wonderful people. No, okay, and probably due to Jennifer's influence more than yours. And so I'd like you all to give a very warm welcome to a very special couple of guests today. We're in for a real treat. So thank you, Jane and Neal, for sharing some time with us. The floor is all yours, whatever you would like to talk to us about.
I'm happy with just that introduction. I don't need to do anything else. So Jane and I talked before, and I'm going to go first if that's okay. And would it be possible to get sharing ability? I was going to share a PowerPoint. So I don't know who Diane looks like the host, if she can make me a co-host, or if I'm just able to share.
Working on it.
Okay. So while I'm waiting for that, let me just say thank you for that introduction. And I'm going to give you a little background about the Tyler Loop, and then I want to talk about what we do, and then I want Jane to focus. She's going to focus more on the storytelling.
You should be good now.
Okay, I'll share in a minute. So let me give you a little background, because the way James introduced that. About a decade ago, somebody moved to Tyler who was connected to national journalism out of Chicago, but he moved to Tyler because of a family connection, so he telecommuted to the Chicago Tribune as a writer and a back-end data analyst, but in the world of journalism. He ended up meeting another national-level writer journalist, very prominent woman named Tasneem Raja, and she had written for Mother Jones. She was a big there in San Francisco. NPR stole her away and brought her to DC. She helped develop the podcast Code Switch. She was one of Google's 30 Under 30, and then she ends up in Tyler. You know, how did that happen? And so, because she married Chris. And so we had these 2 really powerful people in our backyard, and they were working nationally, not really connected with anything local here. But they had this idea, what if journalism was hyper-local, and we told stories on a high level that the community is not normally accustomed to. Database journalism, stories. There were really, if you talk about Chris and Tasneem, they were much more journalism-based and data-based. And so they just did this little project. They just said, what would it look like? And so they wrote a few articles, became incredibly successful very quickly in terms of readership in this new project called the Tyler Loop. But let's be clear, it was just a labor of love, something they kind of did out of their garage. And they intentionally did it for 6 months, got real popular, and then stopped. Because they thought, well, what do we do with it now? And then what they did is they spent a couple months retooling it as a nonprofit. And it was really a board of them and a couple friends. They produced a lot of great material. They would hire some local journalists to do great reporting. One of the big articles that came out in those early days, I don't remember the year, a few years back, was a really deep dive into the history of our local high school, which used to be named Robert E. Lee High School, and kind of what the true history was, and documented history of why that was called that, as opposed to what the other narrative was here, because ultimately the school board changed it more recently to Legacy High School. So that actually got national press. I think the New York Times picked up a piece of that. So Chris doesn't need this really beloved little project here. I was thankfully one of those people that she sat down with at a coffee house and said, we're going to do this little project. What insight can you give me about the community? And so, I got to talk. Let's be clear. That's it. And I was a subscriber, and even though it was free, I paid a monthly subscription amount just because I wanted to be a supporter of this cool new nonprofit journalism project, something we hadn't seen before at this level in Tyler. In late 2019, Tasneem got a large grant from a national foundation, and this was going to push the Tyler Loop to the next level. And then she got her dream job to take that money with her and go to California. And that was the only thing that was going to pull her out of Tyler. And it did. And so she sat down a group of friends and supporters and people who loved the Loop. And we were at an event, and this is, I think, December of 2019. And she just said, what do we do? Do we sunset it and just say, we gave it a good try, all the data is still online, the articles, blah, blah, blah. Or does somebody want to take it over? And then in that same meeting, I got on the board and I became the board chair. But I'm still board chair. So that's how that happened. And that little core group of dedicated people who decided to take it over then faced the challenge of leadership. And so Jane was our obvious choice because Jane had been involved with the Loop on the storytelling platform side, which she'll talk about more in depth. And so as a small nonprofit here in Tyler, dealing in the area of nonprofit journalism, it's a very niche kind of project. But as James said, we're proud to present things that otherwise don't get presented, right? There's kind of a normal way in which media happens, where it's advertiser infused, and then it's whatever the editor of that particular media company decides is important. And then it's also based on happening news, like what happened. But there's no deep investigative kind of look into something in the community, whether it's like a face-to-face about DACA, who are the actual students in DACA, or voting patterns or stuff like that. So I'm going to show you a very fast PowerPoint. Believe me, there's a lot, but you don't need to see, we don't need to spend a lot of time on each one. And this is based on a PowerPoint that I put together, I think, a year ago, just to show you a little bit about some of the stuff that we've done in the past couple of years as Jane's been on. And I'm going to end on the storytelling. So one of the things that we did as a little fun project is immediately when we went into COVID, because when Tasneem left and Jane took over, everything shut down. So we decided to do a 10-part video series. And we had an amazing videographer that we still work with, a guy named Grayson Lackey. And I did I did the editing. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think I did. But just to show you real quick, so these were called COVID stories. So I'm going to go through this very fast because it's not that important. But this guy, what was his impact as a chaplain at hospice? And he talked about, families not being able to see their loved ones physically because of COVID. We talked to, and I don't remember the order of this, so I'm just going to go through. This guy works at a bike shop, and he talked about people going outdoors. Talked about how COVID impacted the food bank. She talked about how she experienced Ramadan here in East Texas during COVID. This guy talked about his business, which he had built up, kind of a local Hispanic business. Mike Gwynn, one of our favorite storytellers and just a great guy, he talked about a book of poetry he put together during the time. Ghassan, who I just had lunch there at his place today, he opened up a Middle Eastern restaurant here during COVID. One of our local heroes, Christina Folsom, she talked about local community agencies and their needs during COVID. This was a Christian school, a private school. This was a high schooler who talked about his own personal life, so forth. So just very quickly, that was just fun is a relative word, but that was an interesting project to say, how do we get this content out there in video form? And we were all struggling with COVID, but we had different stories that we got to hear from the community. Another thing we do is original reporting. So these are literally just some snapshots from our website that I put together for a highlight reel. And I'm not trying to promote any particular article, but so we've highlighted Hispanic businesses here in the community, the School of Social Work, our university, and the kind of development they're doing. Talked about money, right? Again, remember, everything's news-based, so it's just, the Smith County's voting on this, and then they get away from it. But to actually talk about it and process it out, like Brenda did, was really engaging. It's like, counseling for criminal trials. How do we stack up? I don't really even remember what these are all about. Untold stories from healthcare workers. They got to share their personal stories. We did a pedestrian scorecard. Like, is it easy to walk in Tyler? Answer, no. Or in certain areas. But that was a piece. We talked about COVID scorecard. We got in trouble for this, by the way, which is a good thing to do, to get in trouble for, because the data which was publicly available was never coalesced into a single article until Stephen started putting it together, and people didn't like that. So when I say trouble, it was kind of good trouble. It wasn't well, let me say this. You all know that COVID and numbers got very politicized very fast. So us sharing the data kind of created a little stir. This is an older article, but it's still one that I quote today. The average age of Texas, at least when he did his research, is 34. The average age of Tyler is 33. Kind of amazing data crunch. And that changes, businesses and infrastructure and planning, farmland, timber. The medical school is the big story here in East Texas and Tyler now. Redistricting that happened. So, okay, so that's another piece of what we do. I don't remember what the third block is. Oh yeah, this is my own personal pet project. So for those of you who know, NPR has something called the Tiny Desk Concerts. Jane and I created this thing called the Tiny Loop Concerts. And so we pick local organizations and businesses around town. Hey, can we come in for an hour or so and just record some local artists? Sure. And so this one was at the Cocoa Bean. It's a local coffee house, and this is a local musical couple, Charla, who's an amazing harpist, and a different coffee house. And I'm just going to go through this quickly. Let me see. Yeah. By the way, I just want to tell you the quick story about this one. This was the most insane of all of them. So yes, we got this amazing, regional Mexican duo called Gallos de la Rosa, and they're amazing. But where was the location for it? In the local boxing. It's called Rose City Boxing, where like young kids, especially Hispanic kids, go and box. So literally while they're playing, kids are in the background. It was all set up for it, and they're punching bags, but it took like an hour to record them. So the kids were exhausted. It was hot in there, but they were in the ring. The kids were over there punching bags. And if you watch the video, they're like all 10 minutes long. They're all on YouTube. But I love this one. They're like, where were you today? I'm like, where was the rabbi today? Oh, I was filming Hispanic regional Mexican music in a boxing gym in North Tyler, because I can. Just kind of quickly go through these. I'm just proud of these. Not only was this an amazing concert that Jewel and her husband gave, but we actually took one of their songs and it became the intro music for our podcast because they're so talented. We had this amazing gospel choir from Tyler High School come together at a shop here in the center of town. This amazing, I want to say, is it mariachi? I'm not sure the right language. It may be mariachi, but her particular music, she's very popular, this young woman, and did an amazing show for us. Covenant, who's a wonderful religious singer, folk singer, two of the great jazz greats in our community at a Filipino bakery, because we can. This one was at the Baymont Suites, which may not sound like an exciting place, but it's the only female-owned hotel in Tyler, so it's very interesting. So anyway, and then Ray Moth did a Christmas show at Jane's house. So what are we doing? We're producing content, whether it's the original reporting, the database journalism, whether it's that special series of COVID, the Tiny Desk Concerts. We also proudly, I don't know how effective we were, but we were the only organization in town that showcased the candidates for our city council races. And it wasn't a debate. It was just the two of them being asked questions by two very bright people locally, just to engage them. And we turned that into a podcast as well, so people can know, what does Greg think as a city council person or steward on the left? It didn't happen with any other group, right? It's just go out and vote. But who are the candidates besides their yard signs? So we wanted to get a little background. And usually every election cycle, we profile all candidates if they're willing to be interviewed. This is another one of those. We've done specialty projects. There was a very prominent young man who unfortunately passed away. And his name was Drake, and he was very prominent here. And so we did some graffiti. We did a video about reactions to Drake, just people sharing their personal story about him. It was very popular because he touched a lot of lives, and he had he committed suicide, and so that's why it touched a lot of people. We did, and this is really Jane's project, but Oakwood Cemetery, which is our historic cemetery, we have a beautiful video. I think it's about 5 or 6 minutes long, where Jane tells a story about Oakwood with this gorgeous video. This is a clip from the video itself. There was a cool graffiti event here that we covered and did a nice video for. And then ultimately we have a relationship with UT Tyler, where this is becoming more active, where Jane is going over there and either doing projects about storytelling or teaching people how to do storytelling. And finally, and this will be the last thing, is the Out of the Loop, which Jane is going to talk more about, which not only is a presentation of storytellers, but we also go back after a year or so after we turn it into a podcast. And so that's become very popular too, the Out of the Loop podcast. So ultimately, what is the Tyler Loop doing? The Tyler Loop is trying to, what James said, give voice to people who generally don't have outlets for it. The one thing I didn't put on that slideshow, and I don't know if this is a success story or if this is just a footnote yet, But I was interested in something called like an opinion blog, right? Like if you wanted to write a creative piece or you had a commentary about politics where would you post it, right? I mean, it could be, I guess, on Facebook, but who hears that? Your own little echo chamber. So we created something called the Tyler Babel. It was an unfunny attempt at Babel, Tower of Babel, with multiple voices and Tyler Babel. Like I said, joke didn't work, but I tried. And so we've had quite a few people share personal opinion pieces on the Tyler Babel. Sometimes they're politicized. Sometimes it's, personal introspection. One time it's about meditation. But we have that as a drop-down menu for people who are interested in hearing what local people say. It's not about journalism. It's just about a creative outlet space. So I know what the Tyler Loop has been. I know what our strengths are. Let me just say one thing, and then I'll turn it over to Jane. You asked about funding, since you brought it up. The budget for the Tyler Loop is small, right? Especially in nonprofits. I'm a nonprofit junkie, so I've been on multi-million-dollar nonprofits locally, and then what's fascinating to me is that local nonprofit journalism projects generally start with seed money. Right? There was one in Roanoke, Virginia, just had $500,000 to start it from a local philanthropist. Fort Worth Report, which is a kind of an amazing publication, kind of a sister publication to us, maybe, $1.25 million. The Tribune, Texas Tribune, was a large dump of money. They're talking about doing it in Houston, creating something akin to the Tyler Loop in Houston, and that would be a $20 million startup. What was our startup? Chris and Tasneem in their garage, right? It was a labor of love. So we didn't inherit any money for startup, for sustainability. So it's really subscriber based. I'm not going to get into numbers. I'm just going to say those people who do monthly contributions to us. And then we are currently in the middle, like starting today, November 1st through December 31st, we're in the middle of a doubling match period where if anybody makes a donation, it gets doubled from a national organization called News Match. The board is tasked with ultimately bringing in a little bit more money, fundraising, but we're committed to not having, I don't want to say we're not committed to having advertisers, but we want sponsors, right? That would be fun, but we haven't gotten there yet. But we don't do paywall. That's a given for us, right? Everything's on social media, our website, it's out there, it's free, but it's all digital. My wife, by the way, real quick, and I'll wrap it up. My wife's a Rotarian. I forgot to mention that. So she's a member of the Rotary Club here. And I've spoken to a bunch of...
And she's welcome to join. She can be along to us too. It's
great.
Not exclusive. We'd love to have her and you and Jane.
Well, I'll just say I spoke to a group. I don't know if it was a Rotary Club. It was some other group in a little bit place north of town. It was up in Lindale or Fan, or I forgot where. But the thing is, it was about, 70 or 80 old white people, right? Just being honest with you, in terms of the club. I think it was like a Lions. I don't remember what it was. But what was fascinating was they said to me after I gave my pitch about the loop, because the person they wanted me to talk about, they said, "Where do I pick it up?" And it made me laugh because like you go online and they're like, and I type in HTTP, I'm almost annoyed. And then that the content that we produce, which our goal is to both celebrate our local diversity, but also to kind of nudge local narrative, is not being heard by the people who need to hear it. And it has to be in print sometimes for them to do that. So I don't know how we're going to bridge that gap. Let's figure that out after we win the lottery. But I'm really proud of the Loop. I've been in the board chair, and I'm super proud of all the work and imagination that Jane has brought to it, because she's the real expert. So I'm going to pause and let Jane take over. I saw no one won the Powerball, including me. I tried.
I appreciate these comments rolling in. Thank you, Neal. That was such a nice setup and a nice retrospective for me to see what we've been up to. Makes me feel a little bit proud, or more proud than usual, of the Tyler Loop. So I want to touch on a few things that are unique to the Tyler Loop, and then ultimately answer. James, are we calling you Wes tonight?
Oh, it's James Wesley Balberding, and I just go by James because it's so hard to explain that my mother liked Wes more than she liked James, and so but Wes is what most people call me who know me. And so, but Wes
Okay,
is fine.
I'm
So is
going
Jeff.
with Wes because I've
All
heard
fine.
3 people call you Wes in this
All fine. All
this
fine.
meeting. Okay, wonderful. I'm glad you're not offended that I called you James 2 times already. I ultimately want to answer your question of doing a creative project from conception to execution. So as Neal said, one thing that is completely unique to us is that it sounds radical. It's really not radical. It's a model that's been around forever, and that's having public no paywall reporting and journalism. So we follow that model of NPR, or more locally KERA in Dallas, which means that we are donor supported. So we have over 100 monthly members who give. Usually it's $15 a month. That's sort of the standard, but some higher, some lower. They give that a month, and that is our main revenue. So you can crunch the numbers and see it's not a lot of money. I'm a part-time ED of the Tyler Loop, by the way, and Neal does a ton of volunteer work, as we so appreciate. But there's nothing like that exists. And so journalism is becoming more and more advertiser driven, paywall driven. It's a business. Of course, it has to have money to sustain itself and run. Our unique difference is that we are sustained by the community, and we're asking the community to chip in and contribute to something that it values. Some areas, including East Texas, all over our nation, are called journalism deserts, just like we have food deserts where there are only, convenience stores with processed food. We have areas in Texas and all over our country that are deprived of some real substantial news and journalism and information for its residents. So, Tyler is not faring as poorly as some other communities in other parts of the region, of the state, but it is one of the more significant journalism desert areas. So these are cropping up. Places like the Tyler Loop are cropping up all over our nation. It's really a movement. So organizations like Newsmatch are specifically designed to support independent local journalism and reporting as such as ourselves. So that's one thing that makes us different and cool, but it does mean that we're driven by the community and we rely on the community for virtually everything we do. I want to talk to you about kind of the blend in storytelling and journalism, and how they're not really, the separation between those is pretty fuzzy. So I came into the Tyler Loop originally as a storytelling director, and what that means is it was originally a conception that was just meant to be sort of this fun event and kind of a pilot project. Let's just see how this goes. Most of our content is digital, so this was one way to have an event under a roof with people there, was to do a storytelling event. So if you're familiar with projects like the Moth Radio Hour, which I think it premieres on NPR like every Friday or Saturday night. There's also Snap Judgment, one of my favorites, with Glenn Washington. Out of the Loop storytelling came in that tradition. So these are not folk tales, they're not scary stories, they're not once upon a time stories. These are true personal stories. And what makes them journalism, in quotes, is that they are local. So not only am I asking people to share something from their lives, I'm asking them to say how they are impacted by East Texas. Like, what does their story say about Tyler and East Texas? And then, or in reverse, how are Tyler and East Texas impacting their very subjective personal story? And it's so interesting to see the connection this makes to the audience. So I'll never forget the very first season. We had a young woman, Muslim woman, wearing her hijab, and she comes on stage and everybody's, curious and it's provocative. And she starts out by saying, so I was standing in line at Rice Road Brookshire's, which is our local grocery store. This is still a small enough town. We're at about 107,000 people, that people do all go to the same locations. We do attend the same grocery stores, churches, public areas, restaurants. you could just feel in the theater that everybody knew exactly where this woman was in her story. And so it was really a very local, universal yet very specific moment that that couldn't have happened anywhere else in any other theater in the world, but in Tyler, Texas, because we're all having that local shared experience. So a lot of what happens in our storytelling are these really local moments where we're talking about the school we graduated from, or a teacher who impacted us, or a street we lived on. And so these are just constantly making connections. In addition to those connections, which is kind of a form of journalism and reporting, it's information, it's geographic, it's concrete. We're also throwing out a lot of statistics and data in some of these stories. So for example, one woman talked about how her daughter was the victim of gun violence while she was driving home one night on MLK Boulevard in North Tyler. And she ended up giving some stats about gun violence and where it happens and how often. And when you bring these things in, you can see how a true personal story has everything to do with what's happening in your region, what's happening nationally, what water are we all drinking from, that kind of trickles down and impacts us in very personal, deeply personal ways. So we like to call our storytelling journalism, and we like to call our journalism storytelling, because there really is just this gracious cycle we're in where those are feeding each other and creating better depth. Okay, now I'm going to get to the conception to execution piece. That's such a wonderful question, Wes, and here's what I'll have to say about the beauty and also the huge liability of doing a small town project. I would call it a passion project, like we do, is that we can do whatever we want to, because no one has done this before. Like, we're pioneers. So, Chris and Tasneem, who are the founders of the Tyler Loop, just started it and just ran with it. And there was no other competitive group doing it too. There were no constraints. So you're only limited by your time and your resource, your personal resources and what you want to invest or not in it. But otherwise, it's wide open to you. And that's very exciting. And if you are a creative and you're a go-getter, you can do so many things. And you can see Neal going through the slideshow that we've gotten to do so many projects and just try this and try that. And it's it's kind of great response. The liability of that is, if we're not doing it, there are no other supports to make it happen. So it only works insofar as you are personally investing, your blood, sweat, and tears into it. There really is no safety net, and there are no props. And so if we backed out, if we pulled the plug, that would be it for local independent in-depth journalism in Tyler and East Texas. It really would. So there's the beauty and the liability, and sometimes we lean into one more than the other. As far as working on a project from conception to execution, the way I have done that most fully has been through storytelling, and I love every leg of that process. I'm not going to lie. And so it's really fun to be an executive director who also gets to write the thank you notes to the school kids who are going to come to the storytelling event November 17th and perform, and to write the checks and to call the guy for rentals and ask him, how much is this going to cost us? And to sit down with each storyteller and listen to what their story is and help them through their draft, help them through the revisions, help them practice, make the snacks that we're going to do at the table read, and call everybody to come. I get to be on the ground in every little detail of this project. And it does feel very gratifying and very full-bodied and full circle to start with this idea. We want to do true personal stories in Tyler and East Texas. We want people to tell a story in 6 minutes or under. And then to get to have a hand in virtually every piece of that coming together. So in some ways, this feels very homespun, small town, because, for example, my son and his girlfriend are always the ones who serve the beer and wine at our events. I'm going to call my son to help me do that. Or, you see people at the event who were your high school teacher or who you go to church with. And so people are wearing many hats in this small town, and coming together to this event in ways that we kind of all know each other sometimes. And then the surprise is, because our town is so segregated and also becoming more and more spread out, there are people who are showcased and out of the loop storytelling who, depending on what side of town you live in, you would have never heard their story or their experience or their identification with Tyler the way you would hear it on the stage that night. So it's a wonderful way to get to know your neighbors. And of course, we want this to be a fun, entertaining night out, and it is. But the other motive is this is helping people develop shared understanding. It's helping them develop empathy, and it's helping them understand their town and their region in a new light through the eyes of their fellow neighbors. So that's my spiel about the Tyler Loop. I want to remind everybody, now through December 31st is a really hot time for us, because it is really our biggest annual fundraising time, where everything is matched 1-to-1. So it doubles anything you give. And we do need that revenue, just like every other nonprofit. We have shows coming up starting Friday at UT Tyler. We're doing a comedy and storytelling show. On Monday, I'll be up there again to speak to a sociology class that's also open to the public. And then Thursday, November 17th, the 9th at Wes rolls back into town from Mexico City. We will have our season 8 of Out of the Loop with a lineup of 7 storytellers who will be taking the stage and telling their true personal story. So do you guys go to 7 o'clock? Is that right? Okay, I think we're open now for Wes to take the floor and Q&A or anything else.
No, question. Go ahead.
I want to just add on to what Jane just said, because of course, my brain's going a mile a minute here, but I want questions. She made this amazing comment. She just said, if we didn't do it, no one else would, and that we get to do all kinds of cool projects and we try things, right? When Jane first came to me, it just was a random connection because my daughter was in her class, with this storytelling idea. I thought, storytelling in Tyler, Texas, like 12 people. And she was talking about renting a 300-seat theater. And I thought, you're better, find a 12-seat place, classroom. And I was wrong. I mean, it sells out. It's just a really beloved event here in the community. When she says season 8, it means it's the 8th version of the show. So if each show had, let's say, 7 to 9 storytellers, and then there's musical acts to break it up. So you can do the math out. We've had that many stories presented. And then what happens is seasons 4, 5, and 6, I think, or 3, 4, and 5 had to go online, and they became 1-hour documentaries, which, by the way, there's the most beautiful things I've ever seen because the way they got produced and edited. But there are 3 amazing online things that were so good because the storytellers told their stories in a few different places in Tyler, and that's what because of COVID, that's what we got to produce. But now that it's back in person live, and so we've done it once live, and now we're coming back again. One last thing, that's a cool project that nobody else knows this because we haven't announced it, but what we're doing coming up in December is we're doing something called Porchella. It's a porch concert. So we have 5 houses in one area of Tyler, and they've already committed to having people on their porch that are going to play music. Now, we tried to have it a few weeks ago, but we got rained out, so we're pushing it again to December. So, but the idea is for about an hour and a half, just to have people come intentionally to walk the Azalea District of Tyler, and they're going to hear George Faber doing jazz here. We're going to hear indie rock over here. We're going to have the harpist over here. We're going to have the gospel choir over here. In other words, just walk around, get to meet your neighbors, maybe Venmo the artist a few bucks. We're not making any money on it, but we had a donor support us for this project. Why? Because it's a community building project that we're taking on because nobody's done it before. And why not celebrate our neighborhoods and our local artists? So that's another thing that we can do as the Tyler Loop. So this platform has given us a lot of creative opportunity. So I'll just share that other project coming up besides the storytelling. So does anybody have any questions for Jane or comments or booze?
I'll ask. I'll get the question. Have you encountered any resistance from any quarter in Tyler and I don't know what form that resistance would be, but what kind of resistance do you nod your head? So what kind of resistance have you seen, and how would you describe it?
Do you want to do this, Jane?
Sure. Not everybody appreciates our meddling reporting. So everything from the high school name change reporting to the banned books, which have happened both at Tyler Public Library and also in Tyler Independent School District. Not everybody is happy about that being reported or being asked about. So, one thing that we've lobbied for tirelessly is the Freedom of Information Act and our access to public records, which is not even just for journalists, it's for anyone. Anyone should be able to ask a public entity for public records and receive them without too much pain and suffering. This has not been the case. So it has created friction and some contention, which is a delicate matter to handle, especially when like I said, small town Tyler, some of these people are our friends and we have other relationships with them, or people on our board have relationships with them. So it's been, kind of choppy waters to navigate from time to time. And then there are other things that just, we never call ourselves progressive or left-leaning, but I think we are perceived as the outlet in town that provides that kind of reporting. So it doesn't happen so much with our main readership, but when we post things on social media, a lot of times there's backlash depending on the topic. So, hot issues that will be no surprise to you in East Texas. I did a story about people who are both LGBTQ, excuse me, that's my dog. They're both LGBTQ and Christian. That was a very personal, in-depth feature with 9 people in it. And having those two words together, LGBTQ and Christian, upset people and, got over 100 comments, most of which were really, really ugly. Another example in our Tyler Babel post, which Neal referred to, a local woman in town, anonymous. No, she wasn't anonymous. She put her name on that. She talked about her experience getting an abortion. And of course, some tacky comments rolled in too, as one could imagine.
Yeah, So it goes with the territory. We're not, nobody on the board, myself included. Look, I'm a community involved person, so I have zero interest in, upsetting people. But nobody on the board is going out there to be like an anarchist rag, to take down anything. But, we're talking with the city think about city organizations, city management, think about school districts, think about public organizations. Their connection with media is usually reprinting a press release. Nobody asks them follow-up questions. So we did a thing, just one other thing. We did a thing with sharing. We did a vignette. We talked to 5 people who had experience with Tyler Public Water, and it just happened to be during the freeze. Oh, that's how you piss off the city, when you push. And so that has ramifications. And these are my friends who I text, right? And we actually had to file a legal brief. I don't know if the legal brief is the right word, Wes, but or whatever. I don't know what the right term is. We filed a legal complaint, and we sent it to the Smith County District Attorney because the school district was in violation of the Freedom of Information request. And basically, the answer was their attorney, the school district's attorney, had a response. And the district attorney goes, yeah, we'll agree with the response. Like, basically, they didn't take up on the merit of the actual violation. But how uncomfortable is it that these are my friends that I've had to now name, with my name signing it, basically calling them out legally? It went nowhere and we lost, but let me tell you, they changed their tune real quick when we weren't screwing around. Because it's illegal to just blow off people that you prejudicially think shouldn't be given information. Other organizations don't do that here. So we're not that hard-hitting, but we showed some backbone when we did that. Jane, there was a question that came up. How do you find your storytellers? I'm going to let you. That's a great question.
I saw that. That was from Emma. Is it Emma Faye? Oh, hi, Emma Faye. A lot of word of mouth, a lot of referrals, a lot of just asking around. And what's really interesting is sometimes the people who refer a storyteller, they'll know someone just as an acquaintance, and they think they know, oh, this person probably has a really good story. And I know that they or whatever, XYZ. Anyway, the story they end up telling me is not that one at all. It's something that the person who referred them to me had no idea about. So sometimes the things that come out as the story they want to tell are surprises. Often they can be really heavy too. So this is something I've had to watch out for in the show. I become so used to it that I can be tone deaf to how hard it is for an audience to sit with, oh my gosh, this story was about systemic racism, and the one after that was about like poor access to healthcare, and then the one after that was about mental health problems, and just like, it gets so heavy. So I always appreciate it when we have at least a couple of storytellers in there who are more lighthearted or have kind of a feel-good story. But yeah, a lot of calling, a lot of asking, and just putting feelers out. And thankfully, because this is, again, small town Tyler, usually people help me find other people.
I think a story about a great Rotary Club that started from scratch 2 years ago would be a great story. So
we did a thing earlier this summer. This was Jane's idea and conception. It was basically an SNL type sketch comedy thing, but about local topics. And let me just say this nicely, because I was one of the writers. What got presented was was an abridged version of what was actually happening in the writers' room, because you're trying to make fun of the community that we love, but we're trying to pick on them. It gets real mean real fast. So but what was fascinating is what got presented at the Civic Theater, and we had about, 70 or 90 people show up. It was a nice crowd that came, even though Tyler writes don't tell you until 5 minutes before that they're showing up. But that's an interesting loop project. A night of sketch comedy. We had a phenomenal MC who did some stand-up comedy, and then we got to pick on Tyler about transportation issue and kind of heavy-handed religious behaviors and the book banning thing and so forth. So we did it as sketch comedy, and it turned out to be really a lot of fun. But again, no one else does that here. It was kind of a fun project.
I just want to say, kind of on that note, and apologies if I cut out here. I don't have the best service at the moment, but if not, or most, if not all of our club are either from East Texas or have lived there for some time. And so I think we all kind of know the struggles that you face in that area. And I feel like I'm kind of speaking for the club, but I think I can in saying that, we are also a club that embraces and supports diversity and things like that. And so seeing that y'all are, bringing voices to people who in East Texas would typically be voiceless, to me is just so reassuring. Again, I went from living in East Texas to living in New York City and now living in Austin. So, very different views on things like that. And knowing that there are people like y'all in East Texas just makes my heart very happy.
Well, I'll say thank you on behalf of Jane. I look, it's something that we love, but there's a reality of it being and this is not a pitch, by the way, I'm just telling you as a board person, there's a reality of it being a borderline passion project, which is what Tasneem and Chris did because they had other jobs, to an actual nonprofit that can fundraise and be sustainable. It's not for lack of creativity. It's just for modeling it correctly. And I'm being honest with you. I'm just sharing this with you because this is something Jane and I have been talking about recently, about how we're going to ultimately achieve that goal. And we're not alone in that. The difference being that we didn't start with some seed money. So as we're trying to grow this thing that we love and present it, and we do it for all of the reasons that she mentioned, because ultimately it does shift the narrative in the community about people, oh, did you hear about this and did you hear about that? And we've had some misses for sure in terms of some of the storytellers and so forth. But overall, bringing this out to the community and what happens on the stage at Liberty Hall on November 17th will ultimately become articles, content in our publications, and they will eventually become podcasts. By the way, Jane does this amazing podcast where she interviews people, a year or so after the storytelling, kind of their reactions to it. I'm the person who sits up from midnight to 2 a.m. editing it and like putting it into a podcast form, and then we have another board member who helps on the back end as well. So it's a labor of love, but we're just kind of like right on that border of labor of love and passion project and a sustainable nonprofit. But it definitely scratches our creative urges. Is that the right metaphor? I don't know. That's what I used. Scratches that itch of creative. You all get what
it's really interesting you say that, because I feel like our club is almost in a very similar point of like, it almost started as a passion project of sorts of, I mean, yes, we're part of Rotary International, but those of us who were, had been to our RILA program and kind of wanted to find a place for ourselves in a organization that was very, older and non-diverse. And, now we're kind of finding ourselves on that cusp of really becoming something of our own. So I've just absolutely enjoyed this talk and think it was just fascinating.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, the reality is one of the articles that the Loop published a couple years ago, I think was one of the most telling ones, and it was just data-based, so people can agree or disagree with it, but it's data. And it was basically saying that Tyler is, and I don't know if we already are, or I think we already are, a majority-minority community. So the majority of Tyler is non-white. I'm going to get is that right? But like whites are 48%, but 52% are non-white. So the largest group are whites, but the largest are non, which is a mix of all the others. And so that changes everything. It changes everything from policy decisions to infrastructure to local public school funding to all kinds of things. But that data doesn't come out of nowhere. I mean, you have to hire people to go out and research that and vet it and so forth. But that's the kind of stuff when I talk about changing narratives. It's not just about hearing stories, but also about making our community process things in a way that is not in a tiny little bubble, So.
Well, I'm going to thank you very much, both Neal and Jane. It's a great honor, just a genuine honor. You guys have taught us so much. And do you guys have any lawyers on your board? Do you need a lawyer? I mean, count me in.
Okay, you're our lawyer. I did consult with somebody about before we did that brief, but or whatever that.
I'll be glad to help. I'll be glad. I belong to some other organizations, and I try to put in my share. But thank you very much. A great honor. Let's continue our relationship, and I think Layla is going to close us out with our 4-way test, I believe.
Yeah. So I was trying to post it, and Liz, can you do that? Because I think you're on your computer. I can't do it from my phone. That way, Neal and Jane, y'all can join in with us. So we'll give her a couple of seconds. Oh, look at her. She's going to type it out real quick. I'll give you a second to get the third and fourth one in there. So if everyone will come off mute, and then we will say our 4-way test together.
You forgot the question. You've got the answers, but you don't have the question, Elizabeth. What's the question?
We'll let Layla do that part.
All right. So the 4-way test are the things we think, say, or do.
First, is it the truth?
Second,
is it fair to all concerned?
Third, will it build
goodwill and better
friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Third.
And
five, will I have an alibi?
Always does. On behalf of our club, I would love to thank you, Jane and Neal. It's been super informative, and like Delane said, just kind of like a little inspiration that people in this part of East Texas are still pushing for what's right. And so if anyone else has any questions, y'all will hang around for a little bit longer. But other than that, our next meeting will be on the 15th. Oh, this month also is a little bit of a change. Our board meetings are always open. So if anyone, I think we're all, but still our board meetings are always open. So our board meeting will be moved to the 29th, that week after Thanksgiving. If anyone else wants to join.
So we're having a social on the, what are we having on the 15th? Is it a social networking meeting?
Yeah, that's just US. It's just US for our meeting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I can make it. The difficulty is that I have some scheduled events. So I'll work
Gotcha.
with you that week.
Uh,
I'll be on a bus and I don't have control over where I'll be, but I'll do my best.
Don't
I'll
worry
say,
about
if
it.
not Wes, I have been wanting to do like a Jackbox party game night, so we could do that for social meeting as well.
All right, that's a
Yeah.
backup plan.
Sweet.
All right.
Yeah, so we hope that you can make it, because we'd love to. It'd be super cool for us. Other than that, we will see you on the 15th, everyone.
Thank you. And
Thank
Jane
you.
and Neal, you are always welcome to our club. We'd love to have you.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
This was
That would be a
interesting.
great
Thank you
honor.
all so much.
And I copied that email in the message that.
And we've got a great story to tell. You know, a bunch of people who are changing Rotary little by little. You know, so.
Well, thank you very much for the invite. I gotta go to class right now.
Good night, everyone. Good night,
All right,
everyone.
Take care.
Enjoy.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye, Jane. Good to see you, Michael.